case for the pipeline. How can you possibly say that it's more eco-friendly or moral, if you're against fossil fuels, to ship the oil from Saudi Arabia than from Canada? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But fossil fuels have changed the world, and Alex is here to talk about it, and you're from California.
Yep, Laguna Beach.
That doesn't make any sense. How is a guy from Laguna Beach have your opinion? Do they know you have this opinion in California?
Because I grew up in the fossil fuel hotbed that is Washington, D.C. So, of course, I was taught to love fossil fuels.
Right.
I mean, it's a long story, but basically my background is in philosophy. Mm-hmm. And when you take philosophy and you question assumptions, if you look at the assumptions behind all the arguments against fossil fuels, they turn out to just be incredibly irrational. So for me, it was really a logical thing. I saw this thing that everyone's arguing about, and it turns out that if you think through it logically, the majority is completely wrong.
Okay, so let's go through some of the philosophical arguments.
Sure.
What did you go through?
Well, so when you grow up, at least in modern America, you're taught this narrative, and George W. Bush actually helped promote this, that fossil fuels are an addiction. So there's something that might be convenient in the short term, but that long term are destroying us. Mm-hmm. And you're given three basic reasons. One, they're causing depletion. Two, they're causing pollution. And three, they're causing global warming or climate change. And this is used to say, well, they're an addiction. We need to get off them. We need to use renewable, moral, green energy instead.
Right.
And if you think about this, how much sense does this make? The fact that something has risks or side effects, so let's grant that there's some truth to all three of these, which there is some truth, how does that make it immoral? How does the fact that something is imperfect make it immoral? What if we applied the same logic to vaccines? So what if we said, well, vaccines have side effects. Therefore, if you support vaccines, you're a vaccine side effect denier. How dare you? You're so irrational.
I'm going to adopt that case.
Well, now in Southern California, this has, of course, become a big position, but at least most people recognize it as irrational because they say, look, these things save lives. They're vital. Well, if that's true for vaccines, then that's true for the energy that makes it possible for us to have vaccines.
But we don't talk about
fossil fuels.
We don't talk about the benefits. We talk about the benefits of vaccines all the time, but nobody talks about the benefits of fossil fuels. If it wasn't for fossil fuels, sewing machines wouldn't work. I mean, really, nothing works without fossil fuels. All you ever hear about the argument on fossil fuels is, well, you know, I got fossil fuels so you could have a bigger car. Well, no, that's not the main purpose of fossil fuels, right?
Yeah, although if you need a bigger car, it's great to be able to have.
Bigger the better.
I mean, I'm really glad that the Army isn't driving Priuses.
Yeah, yes.
Right? But yeah, and it's important that this is a point not just about the past, but about the present and the future. Because you'll often hear, oh, we needed fossil fuels in the past, but, you know, they're no longer good. And this is like saying, oh, we needed steel in the past. But, you know, in the future, we're not going to use steel. Let's use renewable materials. Let's build skyscrapers out of wood. Right? This is the logic of saying that.
Wait. That is a renewable source, and they don't want you to use that renewable source.
What, wood?
I can cut wood down and grow another tree, but they yell at you for cutting down the tree. Well, I can plant another one.
Mm-hmm. Well, this gets to the whole philosophy of it, because if you notice, whenever they do any kind of development, even if it's solar and wind, once people see that this involves development, the whole green philosophy of anti-impact says, well, of course we can't impact the planet. We didn't think solar would impact. Oh, my gosh, it involves all these panels and all. The windmills are big. No, well, of course we can't do that. So it's a very much a can't act philosophy, and that's part of the moral case, is that really this is a battle not about green energy versus fossil fuels, but about anti-humanism and anti-impact, that philosophy, versus humanism and industrial progress.
Yeah, because you broke this down, I thought, really well in the book, which was The Moral Case of Fossil Fuels. Alex Epstein is with us. That it's a battle between whether, if your goal is to impact the Earth as least as possible, or to make life as good for humans as possible.
Yes.
Those are the competing arguments. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, wait. I want to throw this in. Those are not mutually exclusive.
Well, yeah.
We don't want to trash the Earth to make life good for humans, because life won't be good for humans if we trash the Earth. So you just do the least amount of damage as you possibly can to the Earth, and know that the Earth is a living thing and it will repair itself.
So Yes, I don't quite disagree. I don't quite agree with that in the sense that in any endeavor in life, you have to be clear on what is your primary purpose. What is the thing that you're optimizing for? And then what's a secondary purpose? So if your ultimate goal is to maximize human well-being, then you care about your environment as a means to maximizing human well-being. But you don't think of it as minimizing your impact on your environment.
That's wait. The reason why I say it is because if we destroyed the Earth, everyone would agree. You know, if there was a big oil drip with lips that could talk, even it would agree. Without the planet, we'd all be floating out in space and we'd die. So nobody wants to, I mean, it goes without saying that you don't want to destroy the planet. We want to make our lives best but if we do that by destroying the planet, our lives aren't great.
But we have to distinguish between a negative impact on the planet and a positive impact. What the green philosophy says is we should minimize impact as such. So let's take the decision to build New York City. If New York City was up for a vote today, does anyone believe that the environmentalists would say yes?
No.
What about Chicago?
No.
What about the first hospital?
No.
What about any given baby?
Mm-hmm.
No, so the idea is that if humans have an impact, it's bad as such. Now, the rest of nature can have any impact at once. So there's really a fundamental bias against humans. And I think everyone has bought into anti-impact as an ideal, whereas it should be, no, we want anti-negative impacts for humans. So I'm a humanist who cares about my environment. I'm not an environmentalist. That's to define your core philosophy as your environment. That's like saying in work, I'm an officist. Like my whole purpose is my office. No, I want a good office because I want a good job.
Right, yes.
Can I ask you a question? I like that. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, okay.
In California, do children throw rocks at you?
I'm actually quite popular.
Are you really?
Well,
it doesn't make any sense to me because you're making sense.
Well,
you're making total sense.
I mean, you have to understand how life works. If you're not Glenn Beck, it's not like I'm recognized on the street every day.
Okay, all right.
But when I am recognized, it's generally by somebody who's a fan. Now, I go to environmentalist rallies or anti-humanist rallies. They recognize the shirt. They actually send people to tail me and harass me because I like taking a lot of video of myself, doing Socrates-style interlocuting with these guys, and I wear this I Love Fossil Fuel shirt. So I do get recognized there, not always positive.
How did you not introduce him to us earlier?
I had him on the show that airs on your network.
I don't watch your crappy show. How did we not know about him earlier?
You need to see this video because Alex, and he had multiple videos, but he stands in the middle of a giant protest as they're moving down the street, and he doesn't move with the protest. He just stands facing the opposite way with a shirt that says "I heart fossil fuels."
No. That's inaccurate because the shirt is actually not prominent enough. So I have a big white sign also that says "I love fossil fuels" because I don't want to equivocate.
What I was amazed about, because one of the reasons I was drawn to the book is that it's an argument that you shouldn't have to make. It's one of the most obvious things that any human should be able to recognize, which is the fossil fuels have improved life so much that there's no one in the world who would choose to go back to the time before we used them.
No.
In reality, they all have iPhones to tell us they would go back to those times.
I'm telling you, don't you remember during the what are those people that were peeing all over themselves?
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. During the Occupy Wall Street thing, they were saying that we had sent one of our reporters down. They said, you realize people will starve to death. You realize that. That won't work. You'll starve to death. Well, that's okay. We just need to get closer to an agrarian culture. And he's like, no, again, people will starve to death. And then they almost threw rocks at the guy who stood up and said, hey, you know what? Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, you guys all have Apple iPhones. Steve Jobs is the guy you don't like, apparently. And they about threw rocks at him and said, you're right, we don't like him.
That's true, and there are those protesters, but I think there's a lot of people who are average people who don't think of themselves as, crazy environmentalists who want to go back to M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. They're people who respect capitalism. They understand that their lives are better with energy and things like that. But they see fossil fuels as inherently evil.
Because they don't. Nobody thinks through what fossil fuels have done for us. Yeah. They don't think that most of the clothes that you wear come from under the crust of the earth. Almost everything that you have, everything that you do, it's not just the gas in your car. it is medicine. It's the pills that you take. It's just about everything that you touch. Am I wrong?
Well, no, you're definitely right about that. I mean, there is this really interesting question for those of us who see the full value of fossil fuels. Why is it that people are against it? And in my view, it's really the framework, the starting framework that we're looking at it from. And this is actually why I said I'm actually quite popular where I live, because I always start the argument the same way. I don't start with fossil fuels. I start with, what's our goal? I say, can we agree that the goal should be to maximize human well-being? And most people will say yes, even though they don't think that way. They're actually thinking in this green way. If you make it explicit, they'll say yeah. And I say, okay, can we also agree that just like we need to look at the big picture with vaccines, so we need to look at all the positives and all the negatives in context with fossil fuels, right? So not that we're discounting any climate impact, but we need to look at the whole picture. They'll say, sure. And once you've set that framework, which is never used by anyone explicitly in the culture, you do what I do in the book, which is pretty much you say, okay, let's look at the benefits of using fossil fuels. And you get to what you're talking about, Glenn, which is not just that it powers things, but that it's uniquely good at powering things. So I use the steel versus wood analogy with skyscrapers. It's not just that it can produce energy, but it can produce energy far more efficiently, using far fewer resources and other things, which means it can be more abundant and more affordable to billions of people. So the fossil fuel industry should be bragging, we've got the best product on the market. We have a superior product. Instead, what do? They say, well, we're trying as hard as we can to use the loser product, solar and wind. And someday we'll go beyond petroleum and hit that ideal of sunbeams and wind gusts instead of ancient dead plants.
Right. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about people like BP? Because honestly, we've talked about this a million times. I'm in the oil business. I would be on the front line of saying, look how good our product is.
Yes.
It's like if you're making Captain Crunch and you're like, yeah, you know, our cereal's really bad for your kids. Eat a little bit of it while we try to come up with some other cereal.
We're working on putting kale into the Captain Crunch.
Right, you're never going to
Which would be much more justified than thinking that about oil, because you can say too much sugar is a problem. Too much oil. No, more oil is a solution. What problem can't be solved by more oil?
What do you say to those oil companies that aren't taking they should be the ones they should be paying you for this book. They should be putting this in every library.
It should be free at every gas station.
Should be free at every gas station.
That idea, I have not suggested that. Yeah, no, that's particularly good. I'm gonna pose that one. I do over the past couple years, as you know, I spent about 5 years developing these ideas, and I had never met one person from the industry. I didn't know anybody. You know, people think, oh, you must be paid. You must have grown up. I mean, nonsense.
You should be.
I grew up in Chevy Chase. Well, no, they should buy the book. But over the years, the last couple of years.
In large quantities?
What's that?
In very
large quantities. Very large. You know, $3 a book isn't going to, get me that Laguna Beach penthouse.
Right.
No, but seriously, I have made the case to them, look, you're positioning yourself as the tobacco industry. Mm-hmm. You're saying we're an addiction, and then you're saying, but guess what? We're going to create more tobacco jobs. Don't you want jobs? But if the tobacco industry said, let's build more tobacco factories, don't you support it because it'll create more tobacco jobs?
You'd say, no, you're creating cancer.
We don't want jobs destroying the world. We want jobs improving the world. And that's really resonated. And I would say that the industry has started getting better, and we're trying to create resources for companies to do better messaging. But it takes a while because they've grown up in the whole environment of not thinking about things big picture, not thinking in terms of human life. They've grown up being intellectual parasites from the Greens. And imagine their PR people. Their PR people didn't come to the oil industry mostly because they're so passionate about oil and they get the moral case for oil. They came with a PR education. So if your PR people aren't even convinced that you're good, how are they going to convince anyone else?
That's a great point.
Moral Case for Fossil Fuels is the name of the book, and it's available everywhere except gas stations, unfortunately. But Alex is here, and he is a philosopher who is trying to teach us to change the way we think about fossil fuels. Let's go to the increase in CO2 is causing climate-related deaths, and when the truth is we're actually saving lives because of fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. Go.
It's really weird how we think about climate in a way that completely defies common sense. What is climate? Climate is just the range and frequency of certain types of weather. And if someone said, hey, I want to make sure people are safe from climate, let's find the most efficient solution. You'd probably say, you wouldn't say, it's, let me not drive an SUV. That's going to protect people from climate. You'd probably say, let's develop countries. Let's allow them to make themselves progressively climate proof. Let's take a place where you have 100,000 deaths and reduce the death count to 100 because you have infrastructure.
Like we did in California with earthquakes.